You're listening to VoiceOver Coffee Shop, episode number 21.
Welcome to the VoiceOver Coffee Shop, where we share our morning with some of the finest names in voiceover. And now, here's your host, voice actor Andrew Morrison.
Hi there. My name is Andrew Morrison, and welcome to the VoiceOver Coffee Shop, where we start our day with some of the finest names in voiceover. If you'd like to know more about me, feel free to visit my personal website at www.voicebard.com. In this episode, we have coffee with my dear friend, Anne Ganguzza. Anne has worked years as a voiceover talent, coach, demo producer, and is host of the VO Boss podcast, where she continues to blend solid, actionable business advice with just a dose of inspiration for today's working-class voiceover talent. In this episode, we talk about conversational voiceover styles, the art of storytelling, and adapting to the rise in AI.
Wow, thanks for that introduction. That was very lovely.
No worries.
Glad to be here. Thanks so
Thank
much
you
for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. So how do you take your coffee?
Okay, my coffee has to be light and sweet, but not sugar, stevia. So
Oh, okay.
light and sweet, I know. And I tried so hard. I tried for, like, I went on, keto things, and I'm like, no, I'm not going to have half and half.
I was
Well,
just about to ask.
maybe not keto. Well, before keto, there was don't drink dairy. Don't put dairy anything. I was doing like intermittent fasting, so you can't have milk or anything like that. And I try so hard to drink my coffee black and enjoy it, and I just keep going back to half and half and cream. I love it. What about you?
It depends on the day. Usually I drink mine black.
Yeah.
Not creamer every once in a while, but
What kind of coffee, though? That's the question, because
No.
I'm very particular about the kind of coffee.
nobody's ever asked me that. That's okay. So I used to be a coffee roaster, so I used to roast my
Oh,
own.
okay.
And so that's kind of where I learned my business practices with going
Ah.
over to my voiceover side.
Okay, absolutely.
But Bob Bergen recommended Death Wish to me, and so I've been drinking Death Wish.
Oh,
lately.
really?
Pretty
I
good.
cannot say that I've tried that. I am a Lavazza girl.
Okay.
It's with my Italian husband, and so I'm a little snobby. We actually buy the Lavazza beans, and then we grind them at home, every morning, so we have fresh coffee.
Gotta have it ground fresh.
Yeah, and it has to be a little bit on the stronger side. Not espresso necessarily, but it's got to be strong.
Okay. So you started in IT and computer graphics.
I
What
did.
was that transition from that into working in voiceover?
Well, it was easy because I actually installed phone systems. So it just became part of my job to actually voice the greetings for people. And it's so funny. It's so funny that people don't want to hear their own voice or record their own voice for greetings, and they'd be like, oh no, you just do it for me. And so I did, and that's basically how I started, because people are like, oh, you sound so professional. And it was like my thing, I mean, being in technology and constantly being like, nobody's ever happy when you work in technology, because they only call you when things are broken. And so for me, it was unhappy people, dealing with unhappy people. And when I used to go and record my voiceover, or record, the welcome greetings and that sort of thing, it was like it was peaceful, it was blissful, and I got to just be whatever I wanted to be, and I didn't have to like placate people or calm them down. I could just be whatever I wanted, and that kind of translated to a part-time thing. Once people said, oh, you have a good voice, you should try to do this for a living. And so I did part-time, and did all the things, did the studying, did the coaching, and got the demo, and started working part-time. And it was tough. It's tough to do it part-time when you're working full-time, especially because I worked in tech. And so there was no convenient way. Like, I actually worked, on site, and there's no way for me to actually go anywhere to do an audition. So I had to wait till I got home. And that was really tough to schedule my time. And, when you're first starting, it's almost all marketing, because nobody knows that you exist or that you have a something to sell. So it really was difficult in the beginning, but I learned a lot. And then I ultimately, once I got out of that, I went into voiceover full time, and then I had all day to get work, which, was still difficult, but it was almost easier.
Gotcha. So how were you initially marketing to phone system providers?
Well, well, in the beginning, we installed phone systems around the state and the county. So when I was working for the other company, I didn't get paid for it. It was part of my job. So that's how that worked. And then that's how I got all my experience. And then when I became a voiceover artist, then I started marketing, because at that point I could say I had voiced thousands of systems, and it wasn't a lie. I didn't need to tell people that I wasn't getting paid for it. I just said voice thousands of systems, and that's, basically how I got the interest and how I started in voiceover, and then obviously started branching out to all of the other areas that I loved, because I was in technology, and I also worked at a school, so I was teaching as well. So that's how a lot of my e-learning and corporate and all of that experience I brought to my job, and my passions I brought to my full-time voiceover, which is, teaching people. That's why I coach. And corporate, I love the corporate aspect of it, because before I was working in education, I was also working in industry, working in the medical field. And that's another part of my voiceover, that I brought my passion for medicine into my voiceover. And so now I love doing medical narration too, because it's completely geeky. Anything geeky, I love. That's pretty much the way it is. Geeky or technical, I love. And then it really helps. It helps you to establish a place where you're confident in order to market your services.
So what made you want to start doing coaching and demo production? What made you dive into that territory?
Well, because I love to teach. I mean, I'm in front of the classroom for 20 years. I mean, I think when I moved, I was also on the East Coast, and when I moved to the West Coast, I kind of missed teaching. And I decided at that point I wasn't going to go into education when I was on the West Coast. I wanted to just do full-time voiceover. And I started the group VO Peeps, because I kind of wanted a group and to bring education or to teach. And that's really where that kind of started. And then I had started coaching, because that's what I did. And I love it. I mean, I think if you said to me, Anne, what is your calling? Like, what should you be doing in life? It's teaching. And so the fact that I can teach behind the mic, do an e-learning narration, and I can also coach, that's like it's the perfect job for me.
So you coach in a lot of different areas, but what are kind of the fundamentals of what you teach when somebody comes in for a session?
So fundamentally, I teach conversational style, and that's even for narration. So I truly believe that conversation, just as we're having a conversation here, is really how we communicate human to human. And that's what people want to hear. That's what people connect to. And so even if it's e-learning, if it's medical narration, if it's corporate narration, you have to be able to communicate and emotionally connect with your listener. And I think that being authentic, being believable, and having that conversational, style to your voice is super important for doing that. And plus, with all the technology that is advancing in AI and, text to speech voices and all of that thing, the more human we can be, the better we're going to be in all of our different pursuits in voiceover, all of the different genres. We're going to be, the more human we can be, I think the more in demand we'll be.
So what do you do to kind of break someone away from sounding like they're reading a script to sounding like they're having a conversation?
Well, I tell them to actually have a conversation. So you might be in your head having a conversation with that student, or having a conversation with that corporate client, and really just playing that out in your head. Because if you spend the time actually having the conversational part comes naturally. It kind of goes against what a lot of us, I think, do innately. When we start to pick up a script, we start to read it and we hear that voice in our head as to how we might have heard something or how we might think it should sound. And it's not always written conversationally. So we kind of go with that melody that we hear in our head. But in reality, you just have to have the conversation. The answer is always in the copy. So instead of taking the time to listen to what you sound like, take the time to actually figure out, what is the conversation? Is there a question being asked? Is there, is there a comment? And revisit that every so often in your script, because I think one of the biggest things that we do also when we rush in to do our auditions, we set the scene. We're like, okay, I'm Anne. I'm talking to my friend Sue, and we're eating Duncan Hines, cake and drinking coffee. And and so we spend all that time setting up the scene, and then we pick up the script and we just read it. So, and then Sue is like left in the kitchen going, "Hey, Anne, yo, we were having a conversation here. What happened?" And so you need to constantly revisit, and it becomes like, "Oh, I forgot about Sue. I need to go back and revisit." So our thoughts need to be with that conversation, as opposed to like, what does my voice sound like as I say this? Should I be happier? Should I be smoother? And that just takes up a lot of brain power. That's unnecessary when you listen to what you sound like. Because when you listen to what you sound like, it sounds like you're listening to what you sound like. And that doesn't connect with your listener. If you don't care about your listener, why should they care about you? Really?
Right. So you mentioned AI, and I'm curious of your take on this, because where do you believe that AI has a stance in the voiceover industry? Because I know there's a lot of buzz of how
Mm,
AI is going to take our jobs, and the technology is getting more and more advanced and able
right.
to create emotion more and more. So where do you think that's going?
Well, I think we're not stopping AI from being developed. It's going to continue to be developed. Voices are going to be continued to be used in applications on Alexa, on Google, and AI-driven voices will be doing a lot of things for us. And technology evolves. And I've always, because I worked in technology for so long, I'm very used to kind of being on the bleeding edge. I call it the bleeding edge of technology, where you basically, things kind of suck in the beginning. Like they may not work great, they may not function great. As a matter of fact, when I installed phones for the company, it was voice over IP phones. And I remember in the beginning, like they used to cut out, there would be like the sound quality was bad, there was echo, and everybody would say, "Oh my god, these are never going to make it, it's never going to last." And 15 years later, 20 years later, that's all we use really, as voice over IP phones. All of our phones are over the internet. You don't really have the phone company come in and install actual POTS lines anymore. So the same thing I think is going to happen with AI. And I think what we need to do is to educate ourselves about AI and figure out how we can work along with it. I think that there'll always be a demand for a human voice. I think that AI has really come far. It's not at the point where I believe you can direct it easily, right? There's not a lot of emotion yet. It may get close. It may never get to the point where, there's emotion. I think that humans are developing it, right? So there's a certain point at which the human that is developing it may not develop it to be more human than the human. Right?
Right.
That's developing it. So there may be a point at which it'll be good. It might be really good, but we may never get to the point where, is there a clone really? Maybe, maybe not. And I think for voice talent, I think if we can set the ground rules, this is where it's the Wild West, just like digital media, right? YouTube pre-roll. We're at that very infancy stage of being able to define our own terms. And I think that's exciting. I think that's a real exciting place to be. I think we have to be very, very careful if we do any suspicious kind of jobs that might, require thousands upon thousands of lines. If we're going to work for a company that's going to have us do that, read those contracts, make sure that usage and, everything is specified. And if it doesn't seem right, get a contract, get a lawyer, make sure what you're signing up for and what you're getting paid for is fair, if it's ethical. And I think right now, there's a case going on right now that I think is going to set a great precedent for voice talent. And I think that laws need to be established as well. I was just discussing, I'm running a voice and AI series on my podcast, on my VO Boss podcast. And I was just talking to a gentleman from a company. And I said, "What do you think about, fair compensation for the voice talent? How can we get on, how can we align with companies to ensure that this happens for us?" And he said, "Companies don't care." Like, he goes, "The bottom line for companies," and this like brought me right back to my corporate days. It's true. Companies, what, they're there to make money, right? So they're going to make money on what they can make money. And so unless there are laws or a contract there in place to protect us, they're going to get away with what they're going to get away with. So we have to take responsibility. as as a community, as an industry, and for ourselves, that our voices are protected. So I think it's coming. I think we are certainly not going to stop it from coming. And I know for myself that, yeah, I'm going to just work that much harder to make my voice more human. So I'm, those take the, get coaching, get, acting, because I think there'll always be, top dollar for a great human voice actor. And then, hey, maybe let's establish some sort of standards, right, for AI voices. If you're going to have your voice digitized, right, or you're going to create a voice dub, well, then your voice dub should get paid a percentage every time it's used. And I think this is the time to do it. I mean, it's time to be on the ground floor and make the rules. If we don't, nobody will, right? Or unfortunate circumstances will happen, right, where something will get abused and then somebody might get hurt and then there'll be a law. And I think that that's just something that is, reality. And we have to, if we stomp our feet and say, no, I will never voice an AI or, a text to speech, I think you have to really think carefully about that, because if you don't, somebody will, number one. And it's okay if you choose not to, if you don't believe in it. I mean, I understand. I've worked in technology for 20 years. Technology is scary. It can be very scary. And I think it's the only thing that holds back technology is people's acceptance of it. I could talk on this topic forever, because I've just seen it, over and over and over again. I mean, I don't know how many times, if you have like, a grandmother or grandfather that just, oh no, I'm not gonna use that computer, like it's one of those things. It's just, as we evolve, people are, I'm not so sure about it. So I say educate. And I think it's coming. I think it will be okay if we make sure that we have laws and contracts and things in place that will keep our voices safe.
So when you're marketing to an e-learning client that uses automated voices because they feel like that's the best way to go, how do you portray the value of what you can bring to the table?
So for me, because I'm a teacher, I can always come at it with that perspective, and here's the deal. If I'm going to be marketing to somebody, I'm just going to say that, I've been a teacher for 20 years. I know what it takes, right, to engage the learner. It's all about engaging the learner. And that is something that you're not going to get with an AI voice right now. And I think that there's a place for AI voices, maybe in education, maybe in those small phrases where it might be, the definition of this word. I click on the word and then boom, there's a AI bot that comes up and gives me the definition of that word. But I think for anything that you need that's long format and needs to be engaging, a human is what you need. I mean, think about what was the qualities of your favorite teacher, like in grade school or high school. Like, you had a favorite teacher, I assume, right?
Absolutely.
And so what was it that made that teacher your favorite teacher?
She brought birds to class.
There you go.
And she always, like, I don't know. It's hard to pick a favorite. I had a lot of really, really good teachers. I had one that would bring lovebirds to class. I had one that would always wear these like long flowing dresses. One would have like cherries on it, and then the other one, like, I don't know. Definitely their personality.
Right. And that, like, somehow they reached you. Somehow you liked learning with them. And I think that's the untouchable, the innate thing that a computer generated voice can't emulate. Like, behind the mic, I'm teaching, I care. There is something about my voice. There's care, there's the emotion, the fact that I'm emphasizing certain teaching moments to you, shows you, and audibly, or you can hear audibly, that I care about you and I care that you're learning. And that, I think, is something that is just not possible right now. And even not in the near future is that going to be possible. Because here's the deal. From my knowledge, right, for making AI voices, it takes a lot of money right now to make a good AI voice. It takes a lot of computing power and a lot of money to generate. I mean, we're talking tens and tens of thousands of dollars to make an AI voice. And so I think that in reality, the money that needs to go into AI development yes, the voice is important, but I think there's other things that are going on in AI that are super important that don't necessarily have to have a voice that sounds human, right? What about those, like, again, those tasks that we don't necessarily expect to hear a human voice, or we're okay and we're accepting of that? I think the money can be well spent in different ways to use AI to help us. I mean, I'm a cancer survivor. I would love for, the database, an AI database to compare my tumors, right, with a million other tumors or whatever it is, to find the best solution for me, the best course of treatment. That's where I feel like AI is like really going to be beneficial, and those types of things. All of those tedious things that that can help us do our jobs better, so that we can figure out more cures, right? So and I like to think that if there are jobs that are being replaced by AI, that it will also create new jobs, and it will allow us as a human race, right, to use our brains for doing even more wonderful things and inventing more amazing things that will help the human race, really. I mean, now I'm getting very like broad, but that's, I mean, I love I love technology. I really do. And I believe in the good of technology. And I know that there's technology that can be very bad, but if I really focused on that for the rest of my life, I'd be miserable, and I don't want to be miserable. Like, I want to focus on the good that technology. I mean, I want a voice, or I want AI to help somebody who needs help, right? If somebody, and I know one of the developers that I spoke to in one of my other interviews, she developed a voice app that would allow her to monitor her son's health progress easier, so that if she had to take his temperature, she could just, report the temperature via her voice to the app, instead of having to go and write it down and leave her son. And so there's lots of good things that it can do. And I want to just believe that as a human race, we're going to do that. We're going to do the good thing. And I'm sure there's bad things, but I want to say that the good will win out.
Yeah.
I'm just an optimist.
So with your voiceover career, what have been some of the biggest resources that have helped you develop it to where it is today?
Oh, that's a good question. I think the internet is huge. Obviously, I was a big social media person when it came out. Now, social media has gotten a little crazy. In terms of, like, I think it's may or may not be as healthy as it. I don't know. Was it ever healthy? It was always a great way to communicate with people. Like, I loved it because I could communicate with my family who, are 3,000 miles away, and they could see what was happening to me. And I caught up with a lot of great friends. Today it's gotten a little crazy out there, and it could be that it's a little addictive. It could be a little, lots of things going on with that. But that was one thing in the beginning that really I utilized as a resource to reach out to people. It was the way that I developed my VO Peeps group, because we became a global community of voice talent. Whereas before, we all felt isolated. And this was back in the 90s. I'm going to say in the late 90s, when I started, getting on the internet. And when I moved here, I formed a group, and it was great because we could come together with a common goal, right? We wanted to improve our voiceover business. Well, what did you do? What mic did you buy? And so it really was a great way to create a sense of community. So I think resource-wise, the community that we have is amazing. The way that we can connect each other through technology is amazing. We have to be careful because, we're now discovering that sometimes it's not so amazing. So I think there needs to be ground rules and yeah, basically community. Community is huge. And resources like your podcast, things that can give back to the community, that can help people out when just starting out in voiceover. I think that those are wonderful things. It's one of the reasons why I started the VO Peeps group. One of the reasons why I'm sure you started your podcast. And one of the reasons I started my VO Boss podcast, because I wanted to give back to the community. And I think that is probably one of the best resources out there.
Gotcha. So we spend a lot of time in the booth and behind those padded walls. What do you do outside of the booth to kind of recharge your batteries? What does Anne Ganguzza enjoy? Well,
I have 3 amazing studio cats, which are huge sources of entertainment for me. I have that. I have a wonderful community. I mean, I know it's been kind of crazy the last year or so, but I have a wonderful community that I just moved to, and so I spend weekends, in a safe social distance from people. That has been a kind of a wonderful thing to have during this time. And also, we have lots of really beautiful trails by us. So I've gotten to really connect back with nature, which has been a long time, because I do work a lot. And so what's really wonderful, when I stop working, I get to go outside, and that's really helpful for me.
Okay. So if you were to write a letter back to IT Anne Ganguzza today, what would that letter say?
Oh my goodness, let's see. Let's see. To always be strong and believe in yourself, because I'll tell you what, this journey in building a business, not just being a great voiceover artist or a great coach or a great demo, it's really being an entrepreneur. It's interesting because I've found that over the years I've pushed myself further and further, and it's scary, like there are some things that are really scary, like, oh, I incorporated, and oh, I'm prepaying my taxes, and oh, I need to invest money to hire people. I mean, I literally have right now, like a team of 9. They don't work full time for me, but they all do their special things. And so to get yourself to a point where you've either grown your business and diversified, and had separate, what I like to call my parallel paths of income. It took a lot of, kind of go on out there and just give it a try and be brave. And if it fails, be willing to evolve and shift directions. And I think IT Anne was pretty content at doing her job well, and I was always a hard worker, but what always happened, I think, with a lot of people in corporate and a lot of people, it's always like, well, I was never appreciated. Like, I worked so hard and my boss didn't appreciate me, or my colleague took my ideas and then ran to my boss. It was always that kind of a thing, where now when you work for yourself, it's, well, you've only got yourself to answer to. But it was always like settling a little bit. It was great. I mean, I loved what I did, don't get me wrong, in technology, but it was always felt like there was always something that I wanted to do more. And I didn't want to have to let anything get in my way, like a coworker that maybe wanted my job, or I didn't have to worry about that. Or a boss that for whatever reason didn't see the things that I saw or saw it the same way. So, being brave and doing this full time was probably, it was the coolest thing I've ever done. And I'm really proud. And I'm really proud that I keep pushing to grow. And I think that every one of us doing this has the potential to just be amazing and to grow beyond what you even thought. Like, I never would have thought that I would have had a podcast, or I would have been able to, to kind of have these different channels, to have a podcast, to have a successful, networking group, to be a coach, producer, and do everything that I absolutely want to do, and still take steps that are scary, but yet get through them.
Heard.
My letter would be brave and be strong. You can do it.
So you mentioned adaption. How has your daily routine changed pre-pandemic versus now?
Good question. You know what? I got really good. I got really good at working from home. And I remember, as a person who worked in, the corporate world, it's kind of an adjustment in the beginning. But I became very well used to working from home and actually enjoyed it a lot. So once the pandemic came, I was fine. I holed myself up in the studio, and I was good. I just kept going, which I thought was great. The only thing different right now, I probably work more than I should. So that is how my routine changed. It's been good, and it's been maybe not so good for me. I got to maybe not work so many hours, but I will say that I was fortunate, and I'm very grateful to have had the opportunity to work during the pandemic. I mean, there's so many people that didn't have that fortune. And I'm really thankful that I was able, to continue, and actually, was really busy working, and I'm very happy. I'm very grateful for that.
So where can people find you and your work and your coaching?
Well, I make it a point to try to be everywhere. So on social media, or so if you type Anne Ganguzza at the Google prompt, Anne Gangoogle, that's what sometimes people call me. But anyways, you can find me at anneganguzza.com, ANNEGANGUZZA.com. And I have quite a few other websites, but for the most part, you'll find everything you need to know at anneganguzza.com. If you want to listen to the podcast, I will say the VO Boss podcast. And if you want to talk about global connections with other voice talent, VO Peeps.
Thank you for coming on. I agree.
Yes, thank you so much. It was a pleasure. I really appreciate it. And I congratulations on your podcast. I know what it takes.
Thank you.
Yes, you're doing awesome.
I really hope you enjoyed listening to Anne talk about how she began her journey in the voiceover industry, how phone systems led to her rise as an incredibly well-booked talent, and how inspiration and adaption led to a successful mindset in the industry of voice acting. If you'd like to know more about her coaching, or her demo production, you can visit www.anganguzza.com. For regularly actionable advice to apply to your business today, you can visit her podcast at www.voboss.com. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Voiceover Coffee Shop. For more information on guests, new episodes, and more, be sure to visit www.vocoffeeshop.com.